I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
There is something about the getting it back part that, like, there was such a, dry spell that was so long, that was so miserable. There was zero emotional and then zero time. Getting it back feels also even more wonderful and rich than it was before when you don't appreciate it as much.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for joining. If you like what we're doing here at The Together Show, please subscribe to us on iTunes. It's free to do, and it makes a big difference, so thanks. Now on to the show. Today's episode is part 2 of the Jonathan and Naomi interview. If you haven't heard part 1, you should probably go back and listen because it will give you some more context for what we're talking about today. Now, to refresh your memory, in the last episode, Jonathan and Naomi shared with us a challenge that they faced that felt utterly hopeless at the time, and how they recovered from that experience. In today's episode, we'll get to hear about these time management tools for families that they've put in place. So with that, let's go to part 2 of the Jonathan and Naomi interview. So you two, for me, exemplify the modern urban couple. You're both educated and thoughtful and successful, and you each have careers that you care very much about, and neither one of you wants the other one to sacrifice their career, and neither one of you wants to sacrifice your own career for the sake of the family, and yet you have a family. You're both in love, you're doing really well, and you have kids who are doing really well. So there have got to be some takeaways about how that actually happens. The statistics show that that trend is increasing right now. More and more couples are trying to make what you two have already going work. But I don't think most people have the tools to do that, because it's, we come from a culture where we have always expected there to be one breadwinner, or at least for the last 50 years. That's what our parents expected and their parents. And so those are the tools that we work with. And you guys are forging kind of a new path here. So what's working?
So I think there's both the aspirational level, and then there's like some very brass tack things that help that we do get us there. I think at an aspirational level, to go all the way back to our initial story that we were talking about, we really do share the same values. We want a joyous household. We both want a family. We want to do well in our careers. We want to do interesting things in the world. We want to celebrate with our friends. We want our house to come alive with singing and dancing and parties that in Judaism they call the word simcha. And I think that influences a lot of how we interact and what we do and how we choose to spend our free time and weekends and life with the kids. And I just sharing that vision, I know it certainly grounds me, and I think it really grounds both of us together and with the family.
Did you know you shared that vision before you dove in?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it was something you actually actively spoke about?
Yeah, we did an extraordinarily interesting and helpful activity actually before we got married, which somebody gave us what they called a private ketubah. So ketubah is a Jewish marriage contract, but the private ketubah is very different, but it's a way of eliciting all of those values and having a conversation so that you get on the same page about things before you get married as part of your preparation for marriage. And so the private ketubah is actually a series of questions rather than an agreement between people. It's a series of questions, and it starts out with, why did you fall in love? Mm-hmm. And it goes into, how do you want to all the way from the really high up to the really, really particular details of what do you want your religious life to look like in your house, but also like what are you going to do about your names? Are you going to actually share the name or have separate names? What are you going to do with your bank account? What are you going to do if there's infidelity? What would you like your partner to do? You want your partner to tell you about it? Like, how do you want to communicate about those kinds of things? What do you want to do about prenatal testing? If you have a kid with Down syndrome, what's your views on what you want to do with the pregnancy? So it's this massive range of questions.
That sounds very comprehensive.
It's comprehensive, but it also elicits a lot of very useful information and sort of values clarification.
And useful, it sounds to me, for everyone.
Yeah, totally. And you're supposed to fill it out separately and then trade and then come together and talk about the answers.
Oh, that's a lovely idea.
That was really great.
Yeah.
And so you did that.
We did that.
And was there anything, now that you look back, was there anything missing on that?
I don't know if there's anything missing. We have roughly every 5 years re-upped some version of that where we've talked about what is the next sort of 5 years of life going to look like. Every business does this, but couples generally don't. And we just sort of fell into this cycle a little bit where we did it with the private ketubah. We did it sort of as we were embarking on having children. And then we more recently did it again a few years ago, like 2 years ago or so, with partly crossing through the decision of whether or not to have a third kid and what is life going to look like over the next few years in the current setup of family that we do have. And those conversations have been very useful. Again, getting to a slightly lower level, similar to what we were doing in the private ketubah of like, how are we going to spend our time? What are we doing? Where are we putting our money? Like, what are we doing with our family? Where are our kids going to go to school? What are we going to spend our free time doing? Things like that.
So those you consider more brass tacks questions versus the aspirational value sharing questions or issues?
They're sort of like a middle level. And then there's like serious brass tacks, which is like Sunday family meeting. And that's like the operational scheduling.
which you do have.
Yes,
we do have, and it's also part of what helps us function as a couple
yes.
and as a family, honestly.
Yeah, before we started
very
doing
brass tacky, but actually extraordinarily helpful.
Say more about this. The weekly it's Sundays.
Well, yeah, so we do a pregame. This is gonna sound totally ridiculous.
This is totally ridiculous. Yeah. Mm-hmm,
so,
but a game changer and what we would recommend to other people if they asked us.
And we do actually recommend this. So on Saturdays, Naomi and I run our own schedule. We have our little internal operations meeting. Literally, very brass tacks. Who's going to pick up the kids? Where are they going? What are you doing this night? Do we need a babysitter? Et cetera, et cetera. What are we doing on the weekend? Is anyone coming over?
And then do you have a shared Google calendar?
Google calendar.
Okay.
And then we usually look out a few weeks just to see if there's anything we need to plan for that's a little bit bigger. And then if there's other stuff that's come up, we often save it for that meeting going back to the time boxing as well. So just generally other logistical busy work that we just have to get through.
Right.
And then on Sunday, this is something actually we started doing a year or two after we started doing the initial pre-gaming, maybe even longer. But I would recommend it to families with young kids.
So pre-game is parents only.
Pre-game is parents
scheduling
only.
Mostly.
Right. Scheduling, logistics, and then with the children, it's review the schedule so they know who's going to pick them up every day.
Even if they don't remember.
We write it on a whiteboard on the refrigerator.
Okay.
And it's still helpful for them to hear it and just sort of get a sense of the week. And then we do what's going good during the week, what's going bad during the week.
Like, in what way?
So it could be as something as are the kids taking too long to eat their breakfast and not slowing us down to get out of the house.
Wow, that is detailed. You guys, that is
detailed. That's detailed. But it's a shared, so everybody can talk about it, right? So we don't say, okay, this is what's going bad, this is what's going good. It's the kids actually who come up with it as well as us. And then we ask the kids to help us with the solutions. So that's actually, I think, the key of why it helps our family is because the kids feel like they have a voice and then they can watch us experiment. They come up with a solution and we try it that week and either it works or it doesn't work. And then they're like, they're learning from it.
Is that the rule? You try it for a whole week?
We try it for at least a week.
Yeah, that's generally the rule.
And particularly sometimes one kid one kid in particular.
It could be both. It could be both.
Sometimes it's like, I don't like that idea. And I'm like, I get it. You don't totally like it, but let's try it. You know, sometimes our older kid has suggested it and the younger kid doesn't like it or whatever. Yeah. But we usually say, let's just try it for a week and see what happens if we think it's going to work well for people. So.
Yeah, and we really try to encourage the kids to take ownership of this. And so we always ask them first before we speak during this segment of family meeting. And during the week, we often remind them if something does come up that they're not happy about. We say, that's a great thing to bring up in family meetings. So if you don't like that rule about whether or not you can have apple and peanut butter and at dinner instead of toast and butter, let's bring it up at family meeting and we'll discuss it and we could add it to the dinner rules.
And then that way you have a structure for resolving that kind of structural dispute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, but you wouldn't push if there was a fight and you needed to discipline one of the kids. You wouldn't push that off to the Sunday meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It would be something having to do with structure.
Yeah.
And process.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing is that usually what happens is there are certain patterns that happen of conflict that happen again and again throughout the week. And once we notice that it's a pattern, or once the kids notice that it's a pattern, then we say, oh, you know what? Let's talk about that at family meeting. So. Right now, for instance, sometimes we have trouble with them transitioning at night, where we go upstairs and they just decide to go crazy and have a really raucous time up there instead of getting themselves ready for bed. So if that happens several times, then we can say, this is totally a problem, guys. Let's talk about it during family meeting. And then that just sort of helps to makes us feel like we have a way of addressing it, makes them feel like, oh, okay, this is sort of important. We should actually be paying attention to what's going on during this time of the night,
Yeah. What's amazing is that specific example of you're taking a little too long to eat breakfast and it's impacting our whole schedule is the kind of thing that when you're not a parent, you have no idea that this is an issue. But when you are a parent, that's a major thing. You have to be at work on time, and most parents have no idea how to deal with it with their kids. So you guys bring it up in a family meeting. It's such a perfect solution.
Yeah. Well, I think it also helps because sometimes you can take it personally as a parent. You feel like the kid is purposely, making your life miserable or slowing things down. And it's usually not, or it is. But, if you give them a way to talk about it at family meeting, then they have a different sense of power. And so then they don't have to, be powerful by slowing you down in the morning. Right. So I think that's why it probably helps in multiple different ways.
And it's really powerful when the kids recognize they've done something and it's helped our family, and then we either compliment them during the meeting or they even better compliment themselves. And it's just, they get it. They totally get it. And then they definitely feel that they can bring things up and get change in the family, and they feel very empowered by it.
So you would say that even if it's just one kid, you've got to be doing this. Now, were you having family meetings before you had kids, or you didn't need them?
Well, we did run schedules when I was a resident,
Yeah, especially when Naomi was a resident. Well, we've been doing the weekly meeting for a long time just to run schedules.
But it was just one. You didn't have two.
Right.
Two meetings.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I heard you use the word problem when you were saying saying you might say to the kids, this thing that you're doing is a problem. I've heard parents feel very shy about using that word with their kids. What's that about?
I don't know, but it seems like it might be related to sometimes people have issues around using the word rule also. This is the rule.
It is a rule.
This is the rule. And sometimes people feel a little bit awkward only because when you're growing up, you're like, rules are a pain. They're just not fun. You don't like them. And when you envision yourself as a parent, you envision yourself as an awesome parent, right? And awesome parents aren't boring and they don't have rules,
right.
So they're sort of ew, rules. I shouldn't impose these rules on my kid. But it's so helpful for kids and it's so helpful for you. And actually, the reason why it's so helpful is because when there's a rule that you can reference, then you can become non-emotional. The rule gets to take on the role of emotion instead of you saying, you're making me really upset right now.
Yeah.
And it might be the same way with the word problem. You can sort of say it's a problem, but that implies that there might be a solution to it. And it is very important to make sure that you say there is a problem, and maybe it's around a behavior rather than you are the problem, right? So there might be some sensitivities also around that, parents not wanting to say my kid is the problem.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Okay. So, Jonathan, you were saying that there's aspirational, mid-level, and brass tacks things that you do. And it seemed like you had just told me one category of those. Are there more?
Yeah, and before I forget, though, to put the exclamation point of family meeting, you got to end it with a fun thing once you have kids. Because it can't just be like boring meeting. You got to do something fun as a family together.
For example,
play a board game together. Go outside and play Infinity Tag, which is our newest one. But do something fun together as a family.
So what amount of time are you scheduling for a family meeting? All in with playing. If we do it right, it's probably 30 minutes.
No.
With playing.
Well, with playing, you're right.
Wow, that's shorter than I would have thought.
It's super short. Yeah. I mean, particularly we started when I think Benjamin might have been 5. You think he was 4. Anyways, our youngest was 4 or 5, and our oldest was therefore 6 or 7. So the 4 or 5-year-old really does not have a very long attention span. So it's pretty brief, actually. I would say the talking part is max 10 minutes, especially in the beginning when everybody's getting used to family meeting and what in the world family meeting means.
Yeah.
And then it gets, and then you do fun stuff.
Now, if anything, we need to move it along sometimes because the kids like to debate different ideas about how to solve some of these problems. It's just very cute and endearing sometimes. They're like, this also is a problem. And we had only scheduled half an hour and before we need to go somewhere. So if we want to do something fun, we got to move along.
What about discipline within the meeting itself? If somebody doesn't want to pay attention, for instance.
So this has gotten easier as both kids are now in school because we just said, same rule you have for your morning meeting at school. Those are the rules we have here. Benjamin, our younger son, why don't you remind us what those rules are? You tell us so that we'll follow them.
What are they?
Sit up, pay attention to the person who's speaking, hands in your lap, no speaking until you raise your hand and the person who was speaking calls on you.
So there's no one leader. It's whoever's speaking last is the one who has the power.
Yeah, we used to have it that one of us would kind of lead it, and since now they're both a little bit older, and basically, just to give context, our older one is 8 and our younger one is 6. So since the 6-year-old is older and he came home with those rules, crisscross applesauce means sit with your legs crisscrossed and you only raise your hand. He made up all those rules. He was like, this is the way it works. So he enforces them. And before that, we were a little bit more like one of us would lead and we'd call on people a little bit.
All right, so about 30 minutes, all in, with fun and gold stars and stickers and candy during the meeting, that kind of stuff.
No.
It's just
and sorry, I was going to say a couple other structural things. One is we do it in a place where there's no toys, so nobody gets too distracted by the toys that are sitting around.
What do you think's going to happen when the first one becomes a teenager?
It's going to be really interesting.
Actually, the first one I'm not worried about, honestly.
Well, the first one is good at debating and can be stubborn.
You're in trouble. I mean, at some point, I can imagine that family meeting is going to break down.
Well, it's either going to continue to be a successful way to deal with these types of issues, or it'll be a venue for us to have some really hard parenting conversations with our children.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, I'm sure at some point, it'll come up. Like right now, they're sleeping together in the same room. Like, I'm sure at some point they'll be raising their hands and saying, I want my own room.
Right.
I mean, we already have some of this. Like, our older son really wants Minecraft on the iPad, and so far we've managed to avoid that. And he hasn't actually brought it up in family meeting, but it's the type of place where I'm sure he'll come and start demanding answers to these things.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, there was one other thing I was going to say, which is that we try not to allow there to be one person singled out as being a problem in the meeting, right? So there was a dynamic for a while where one of the kids was sort of causing more problems than the family dynamic, and we were talking about that problem in particular, and it ended up feeling not nice for him, right? And so we very specifically, Jonathan and I talked about the fact that we would not do that anymore, that it was only things that were a full family dynamic and not just one person having issues. So we would talk to him individually about that rather than family meeting.
Yeah, I can see that being a problem. But on the other hand, the weight of the issues are sometimes going to fall on one person. And so is it that you try to keep that from happening repeatedly, or that you try to balance it in every single meeting?
We try. It's
because it could get really artificial, right? If you're trying to balance it in every meeting.
We're not trying to necessarily balance it. It's more if there's an issue with a particular person, it's like you said, if there's like a fight or something of that nature that we need to deal with, or
you
like
take
a
it
true
offline.
behavior issue, like that's, private.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. This is a great setup. Any other structural points to share?
For family meeting or in general?
Well, family meeting, because general, I see you have more in general.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the general ones. We recently folded an allowance to family meeting.
Do you dole it out at the meeting?
At the end of the meeting, just before.
That's a great way to have incentive to stick around and behave, right?
That's true. They haven't yet considered walking away from family meeting. Nobody has tried to do that.
Yeah, they sort of enjoy it. We have them announce. That's actually been a fun thing. Like they announce the different parts. So like one of them will be schedule of the week, and then
That's pretty cute.
The next one will be good things, bad things.
That's so great. I want to be an Airbnb guest in your house and attend family meetings.
Oh, this is actually really, we have relatives who stay over.
That's right.
Whether or not the relatives join family meeting is always a fun conversation.
What's the answer?
If they're there for long enough, then they come. Right. If it's just they're there for a few days, then we usually don't bother.
Do they participate?
Yeah, we have them participate. We and it's helpful for the same reasons. They need to know the schedule. We need to know the schedule.
Yeah. And Jonathan's parents stayed with us for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that, at the beginning of the school year to help actually while Jonathan was working super hard at the beginning of the school year with Minerva getting rolling. And then it was actually very helpful for them to be there, partly because they were doing so much childcare and there's co-parenting, right? So part of this issue is how do you co-parent with your partner?
Yeah.
But then they were a new set of co-parents in our house because they were doing a lot of pickup and drop off and feed the kids and get them into bed and blah, blah, blah. And so we need to work out our discipline ideas with them as well. And so it was helpful for them to be at family meeting.
Right. Yeah. This is such a good. Okay. So that sounds like I got family meeting. Now, what are the other structural components you've put in place to make this intense family relationship work?
So we do family dinner. And one thing we've started doing there is good thing, bad thing.
Is family dinner every day?
Pretty much every day. It's probably 5 nights of the week. We do family dinner, or at least one of us is with the kids.
Oh, right, because it can't be both of you every time. You're just too busy for that.
It's both of us,
you guys are working
most
that out
times.
really well.
Yeah,
We
we thankfully
hard.
both have arranged our schedules so that between 6 and 8, say, we're home and with the kids, and we both work after 8 o'clock. I call this the Sheryl Sandberg schedule.
Yeah.
She, I think, has done a very good job popularizing that.
Yeah.
But it works. And, if you set up your routine or just very clear with people that this is what you do, you can actually make it happen. And you get really picky about events in the evening is actually the thing that I've noticed, because that's the thing that will actually keep us away more than almost anything else, more than just working late for an extra hour or two.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So doing good thing, bad thing has really helped, because you get a good sense of what's going on in everyone's day.
And what is a good thing, bad thing?
Sorry, we go around the dinner table and you basically need to say, you are allowed to pass entirely, but you're highly encouraged to say one good thing that happened during the day, optionally say one bad thing that happened during the day, and then various other riffs on that have been suggested to us recently are say something you're grateful for that happened during the day.
That's a big one. Or
say something that you tried to do, but it was too big, or you failed somehow, but it's good that you were learning it, because it was actually you shouldn't always have success.
Right. You should always be striving. If you're always succeeding, you're boring.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or you're not learning.
Or you're not learning.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And what else?
One we sort of waxed and waned on is just trying to find, and we still try to do this, but more in bigger chunks, is just private time with the kids, and some one-on-one time with each of us with each child. Really helpful.
Yeah, and they sometimes ask for it. We call it alone time, and sometimes when they're feeling like they need it, they can say, I need some alone time with you, Mom.
Oh, that's nice.
Our younger said that today.
Yeah.
And then also bedtime routine. So we actually kiss them both goodnight and do a little bedtime reading and stuff like that. And kissing them goodnight usually involves at least some kind of little bit of conversation. So it's just another way of just kind of reconnecting at the end of the night, which I think helps. The one other thing also, Jonathan has done a really wonderful thing for me, which is protecting me on Thursday nights so I can go sing with a group. Like it's a women's a cappella group. It's like 30 women, and I think that's been extraordinarily helpful for me, actually. And so that's another structural thing, actually, that made a big difference for us.
How have you facilitated that for her?
I'm home with the kids myself.
You just stay home that night.
And he deals with lunches.
Right, and I deal with lunches. And I mean, the main thing is, like, I've kept that night very inviolate. And, like, people ask me to do stuff on Thursday. I'm like, no, I need to be home to protect this for Naomi.
Yeah.
Right.
And similarly, I have a group of guy friends that we go out, call it once a month. That's at least the goal. And Naomi's been very willing to support me doing that as well.
Yeah. And exercise also. We try to protect each other for exercise. And not as much recently, but I think that's another thing.
I can imagine a listener saying, wow, they've got a lot of structure. It doesn't sound very romantic. But they're not seeing the two of you sitting here. I can see the glances that pass back and forth between the two of you and how much you enjoy being in one another's presence. So I know that you're still doing that. Now, I'm curious, how? Do you know what it is that you're putting in place to make sure that romance stays alive?
Mm-hmm. So one other thing that is actually structural also, which is kind of classic, Friday nights we try, it's this way you're thinking, Friday nights we try to, after the kids go to bed, after dinner, we try to have no computer, no phone, whatever, and it's just time that we get to spend together. And so that's often when we're more romantic. We're not 100%, and it's partly my fault. We're not 100% good at always executing on it, but that is part of what we put into place.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. Some people might not consider it the most romantic date night in the world, but it's effectively a structural weekly date night where we get to spend some time together. And we, then there's we get to go out every once in a while and obviously see friends and things of that nature, that ride on top of that, take vacations. We do. One other thing that is actually, it sort of waxes and wanes, but we try to at least get one, if not multiple weekends alone, just for the two of us during the year. And those I personally find wildly rejuvenating, both personally and for our relationship. 1
or 2 weekends a year? Is that what you just said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
One year we hit 4, and that was amazing.
That does. That it doesn't sound to a single, or to a guy with no kids. I'm not single, but in my relationship with Aubrey, we have a lot of time together. We're just this wealth of time. I feel so embarrassed by my riches of time with Aubrey, and but you two aren't missing anything in terms of your connection to each other, and so I'm wondering if that. What is that? I'm wondering if it's that you're sharing these values and building the family that you both want together gives you that sense of togetherness. Or, I'm just making that up. What is it? How do you do this?
I do think that it's feeling like we've worked through a lot and have come out on the other side and sort of love each other and value each other. That level of understanding how much we value each other and love each other is there. I do think we have a good sex life. I think that helps a lot, that physically we enjoy each other a lot.
How do you schedule that?
Well, that's Friday night. And then the stolen time in the morning when the kids have gone downstairs and they no longer need us when they wake up. There is something about the getting it back part that there was such a dry spell that was so long, that was so miserable between Annus Horribilis and just like zero time. There was zero emotional and then zero time.
Yeah.
That I do feel like getting it back feels also even more wonderful and rich than it was before, when you don't appreciate it as much.
Yeah, having lost it, you appreciate it so much more.
I don't really recommend your
No,
listeners.
I don't either.
And make their life perfectly miserable in order to accomplish this. There's other ways to do it,
but it's also it's real love of our. Like, I think feeling good about myself makes it so much easier to be connected, and so that also makes a huge difference. And so it gets back again to this idea of supporting each other makes the relationship so much stronger when I feel like I love myself and I love him and I feel him loving me. That just really helps.
Do you find yourselves still spending a lot of time processing issues with one another these days?
It still definitely happens.
And when are you doing that?
It's ad hoc based on when one of us does something that triggers the other person, and then we usually find time where we probably should be going to bed. But
are you going to bed at the same time?
Not if there's one source of conflict, the nail on the head. I generally actually try to go to bed earlier than Naomi, and when we do manage to go to bed at the same time, I actually think it's much better for our relationship.
Yeah.
And then sometimes what usually work gets in the way.
Yeah. Are you waking? You are waking up at the same time, though.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Naomi, you just get a lot less sleep. Is it because you need less? Do you need less sleep?
Probably not. No. The intention for me is to go to bed when he goes to bed, but I just have a hard time executing on it all the time. So.
Because you've got stuff to do, or you just can't turn your mind off?
Stuff to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. I'm getting a sense of all the structure you've got in place that is working. So, and I was going to ask you what's not working. You just said one thing. That's a source of conflict. What else? Is there anything else that's not working in your mind?
Yeah, and the other things we've been talking about recently, occasionally I can get very defensive very quickly sometimes. I don't know if it's leftover or just something within me.
Yeah.
But that definitely triggers Naomi, which is totally reasonable. And so I've worked really hard at, again, and all goes back to those same things: compassion, not telling stories about the other person, things of that nature.
Yeah. What does your defensiveness look like?
Ratcheting up anger, ratcheting up intensity very quickly, and I think assuming the worst in Naomi and whatever she's telling me. I think there's still times where sometimes when we're communicating with the other person still tells a story in their head. This goes both ways.
Well, that kind of never stops as a human being, right?
And then it's just a question of, can we then very quickly move beyond that and, approach it openly, or do we hit that wall and then sometimes we have hard conversations?
Is it working? Is it happening?
Yeah, I think partly we have shortcuts now, because we went through the crucible, we can sort of recognize, oh, you're doing that, and then we can say it in a way that's a little bit neutral, and then that person can dial it down, on their own.
That's a good trick that you just pointed to so casually. Because we often can recognize what our partner's doing before they do, but pointing it out usually inflames a situation. So what is it that you're doing? What is it that you're able to point? How can you point it out to him that it doesn't make it worse, especially if he's being defensive, right?
I think usually if I can get myself calmed down, so if he's being defensive, then my ire gets up. Yeah. But if I can notice I'm getting all riled up and I can bring myself back down and I can get close to him and quiet and look him in the face and in a sort of loving way say, I think you're being defensive. It feels like you're being defensive. Let's try it again, or something that sort of it's just the way you say it, right? It's a little bit less the words you use and more like, I still love you, I get you, but it's not working for me.
Yeah.
And it's only because we've done the work that you can say it that way, I think, and that it can, and you can have that work without it being a long drawn out conversation. Because
you went through the, as you call it, the crucible. Yeah, and you're able to hear it, Jonathan. Yeah. Wow, God, that is so powerful. And it can only come from having had that challenge.
I think so. And it doesn't have to be as bad as our challenge was, I hope.
I sure hope so.
It's kind of gnarly.
Do you think you could have...
But honestly, I also feel like watching our kids deal with their own emotional control also helps us to understand, oh, I could go over the edge like my small child does, or I could pull myself back and try and use some of the techniques I'm telling him to use.
Yeah.
And there's lots of books about these sort of conversations, right? Crucial conversations, other things of that nature. And clearly some people are highly skilled at using exactly all those tools to do this in the moment. I mean, I think it helps for us to have certain keywords that we just know that are the things that trigger each of us to get, whether it's defensive or critical, telling stories, whatever those words are, that allow us to be like, oh, right, we're not acting the way we want to with each other.
Yeah.
And I think it also just helps that, in general, life is really good and we're very lucky. And so we want to be back. There's a natural goal to get to.
Yeah. I love the overall perspective that everything's really good. And I'm imagining in the moment when you're feeling very defensive and it's that fight or flight thing. You lose your rationality. I do when I'm in a fight with Aubrey. All my pre-planning about how to be in a fight goes out the window for at least a second, right? And that's when the sarcastic tone slips out, or I'm pretty good at not saying actual words that I shouldn't say, but that flick of the eye that I just know drives her crazy, but I couldn't pull it back, and it just got out, and it makes it so much harder to bring her down. And what's going on inside my head when that's happening is probably instinctive, but when I'm replaying it angrily in the shower later, which you two say you're trying not to do, I'll have a conversation like, oh, I'm such a victim of this. I'm such a victim of her. This is just really hard. I can't believe I have to deal with this. And when I was younger, the conversation took a step further. I shouldn't have to deal with this, and in fact, I'm not gonna. And then I would go get out of the relationship. With Aubrey, that last bit doesn't happen anymore. Something shifted, and it's just not there. The victim part will still go for a little while, but I don't ever say, and I'm gonna get out. I'm curious what that internal conversation is for you guys when you're having it. It'll probably be different for each of you, but do you notice that internal victim conversation going on?
Yeah, I definitely notice it, and there's times I either say like, it's just literally not worth it, like this thing happened, like just be above it, and it's just not worth going into, or if I do care enough, then go have the conversation.
And actually, that is so good. You just don't even have it. You either let it go or you go actually have it. There's none of this internal dialogue.
Yeah, just the in between is not helpful.
I am so inspired by that.
It's usually really obvious between us when we need to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Like usually we call each other on it. Like it seems like there's this thing that happened. Hopefully really soon, really recently, not like a week ago, that we need to actually talk about.
Yeah, but there was an instance recently where it really actually went on for a long time. For me, there was something that happened, and it went on, and I didn't go back to it. I didn't revisit it a bunch in my brain, but it was like an open sore that I knew I needed to talk to him about, but I didn't do it for weeks because we were so busy. And then when we finally talked about it, it was a little bit brutal.
The longer you wait.
The longer you wait, the gnarlier it gets.
Yeah.
Jonathan has this great quote. Do you want to do it?
Sure. So actually, I was told this at a bachelor party in the woods, Berkeley-style bachelor party, where it's you open the resentment closet, and if you haven't cleaned it out in a while, the bowling ball comes tumbling down and whacks you on the head.
So good. That's so good.
It's such a useful analogy. It's like, oh God, comes the bowling ball, and that we can use that analogy and be like, I'm really sorry. Like here it comes.
Yeah,
like,
here's a bowling ball. That's really good. Also, I love the image of the Berkeley, bachelor party. No strippers at this one. That's how they've all become for me too. Well, that's a great note to wind down on. Guys, it's been such a pleasure talking to you two. And I've got a million more questions is the only challenge for me. I could keep going for another hour. If I didn't know you had kids at home, I probably would. Now, to close, I like to play a little game of this or that.
All right.
So we'll start easy. Tab or squirt? You pointed to Naomi. Do you even know what tab and squirt are?
I have no idea what tab
that's
or squirt
great.
are. That's why I pointed at Naomi.
I tried to go back in history to arcane soft drink. They're soft drinks.
I was going to say, I think those are soft drinks.
Those are soft drinks from
Squirt,
our
I've
distant
never
past.
heard of.
It's
Tab,
grapefruit
I vaguely
flavored.
remember.
And Tab was like the first diet soda.
Yeah, neither.
That's right. You're a paleo guy. Okay.
That's right. I was going to say.
All right.
I can sing you the jingle, but I don't remember what they did. Tab, tab, cola, what a beautiful drink. You remember that?
No, but I'm so glad you just did that. Okay, you win. If I had a prize, I'd give it to you. Okay, form or function?
Function.
Yeah, definitely. That was the answer for you too. Battlestar or Deadwood?
This is a TV thing, right?
Yes, I can't believe I stumped you twice.
This is another structural thing, like zero watching TV in our house.
But I tried to go back in time with that one too. Those are 10-year-old shows right there.
I mean, when I was a kid, Battlestar.
This is why you guys are successful. Okay, Battlestar. Just leave it there.
Successfully culturally illiterate, unfortunately.
Probably those two things go more hand in hand than I care to admit. Audi or BMW?
Neither.
Right.
BMW.
Okay, BMW.
We already answered that one.
Yeah, that's kind of why.
Part of the show.
Okay, I can't read my handwriting for this. Encephalopod or pork?
Encephalopod.
I'm going to go pork because I can't really remember what encephalopod is.
Octopus.
Octopus, right. Oh, they're both good. Both. Maybe together, sausage stuffed into the octopus. Grilled.
You're definitely not
good.
Orthodox.
Not a lot of kosher.
Okay, and then the last one. Would you rather live forever, or die in the next 5 minutes?
Die in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, probably the same.
Wow. That's a very thoughtful answer, even with the kids.
Yeah, living forever. Everything I've ever read about anyone who lives forever doesn't sound good.
Does not work out, does it?
No.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks a lot for playing. Thanks for being on.
Thank you for asking us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Really fun.
That's it for Jonathan and Naomi, folks. Thanks for listening. Listen, if you have any ideas for the this or that game, please send them to me. I've got to admit, I've been running out of new material. If you liked what you heard on the show, please do subscribe on iTunes. It makes a big difference to us when you do that. If you have any questions or comments, or like I said, ideas for the game, you can go ahead and contact us on any one of our social platforms. Our website is www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Our Twitter and Instagram are both @together_show, or you can email me at host@together.guide. Our producer is Charlene Goto. Our web designer is Courtney Munna. Our art director, the love of my life, is Aubrey Pick. Thanks once again to my guests, Jonathan and Naomi. And guys, I'm not kidding about Family Fun Time. I'm in. Be sure to tune in for Tuesday's episode, in which you'll hear...
When we adopted a baby, we did open adoption, so we were there for the birth. But the moment I held him in my arms, I felt this incredibly strong idea come up, and it said, you have to be a better person. Right on the heels of that came that voice, which I call the witness for the prosecution. And it said, you're not going to be a better person, move on. And that created some real turmoil in my life.
That's all for today, folks. See you next time.